Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of So Chatty with Stephen and Walter. Say hello, Walter.
Hello.
Walter. And this is episode number 28. It's all about Juicy Lucy. And that's the name of our long arm. And you know, if you're a regular viewer of all my different segments on my channels, that we have been talking about that lately because it's our brand new toy. And we've only had it for a week. Believe it or not, but we've learned a lot in that week. So we thought we would start off by taking a little tour of what it was like when it arrived. It arrived in 7 boxes, and 5 out of the 7 boxes were damaged, but the contents were not. And then we had the horrendous job of putting it together. Well, it's really not that horrendous. It's just that the little sucker is quite big. And it comes with a very extensive manual, as you'll hear us talk about in a little video excerpt that I'm going to stick in here in just a second. We did run into a slight minor problem. We couldn't find certain bolts, but that problem was resolved in about 45 minutes, and it took about 4.5 hours to put together. So whatever these other videos you see that are telling you it takes 2.5 to 3 hours, they've done it before.
Yeah, actually, if you knew, if you had done it before, it probably wouldn't take very long for you to put it together. It's just that what ended up causing us to go slower is that we were trying to decipher each part of the manual.
Yeah.
And that actually took most of the time. The actual assembly didn't really take that much time.
No, the manual is very, very extensive. It's very thick, like it's about 3 inches thick. It has lots and lots of photographs, not diagrams, but photographs of, you know, each of the parts and how to put them together and things like that. Problem is, it covers a couple of different models of the long arm. We have the Lucey, but it also covered the Lenny, which is another one of APQS's machines. And there's also different tables. We're going to talk about the tables and things like that in a bit after you see the video. So we'll talk more about the manual and the different features and what we've learned in the last week by playing with it. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a video in here that shows you what it was like a week ago when Lucy arrived in 7 very heavy boxes. So I'm going to put that in here right now. Okay, so the APQS Juicy Lucy has arrived. And as you can see, there is some damage to the boxes. In fact, 5 out of 7 of the boxes has some external damage. But we were told by the company to take pictures of that and get it noted by the guy who brought it, the delivery guy, and we have done that. And then it says to unpack them and inspect each piece carefully. And then if there's damage to any of the internal pieces, then we're supposed to call APQS and let them know and send them the pictures of it. So I have dutifully taken the pictures, and we're in the process of moving this into the house and unboxing. Okay, so we have all the pieces in and we've started unboxing them and inspecting them. So far, so good. Some assembly required, you may say. Yes. But here they all are, the tracks, the frame, the whole bit. And look, a big red bow on our Juicy Lucy. Yeah, we're still unpacking. Okay, we've got everything out of their boxes now except for the smaller pieces. We're leaving those in there for now. We do have a very thick manual under that red bow to look at and to figure out the assembly of this. We're already pooped. This is not something for old men. I can tell you that. But we did inspect the pieces that came out of the boxes and everything looks like it's intact in spite of the fact that 5 out of the 7 boxes had some significant damage, I would say, but it was very well packed inside the box. So that seemed to protect the pieces. So next stage of this, put it together. So we have started the assembly process and we ran into our first problem. Our first problem was that in the instructions, which are very detailed and very much step-by-step laid out, they show you a little side box telling you the hardware you need for putting these railings on. Well, we didn't think we had all the hardware that they had listed. We went through the boxes, we couldn't find it. According to their instructions, they were supposed to be strapped to these bars. Well, there was one package that was, but it did not have all of the nuts and bolts that we needed. So I called APQS. Guess what I got? I got a person, first of all, who referred me to another department, connected me, and I got an answering machine. I called another time again. I left a message, told what my problem was, and I wasn't impressed at that point. And so then I decided to call them again. I figured, hey, let's just keep calling until we get a human being. Well, I called a third time. I got a human being. Told her I wasn't happy right now. She went right into action. She found the parts we needed. They were with everything, but they weren't where, according to the instruction booklet, inferred that they would be. They were in another bag with a whole mass of other parts. And, well, that's one part of their instructions I found a little bit on the confusing side. But I will say this, she was able to, over the phone, help me locate them, and that's okay. So this is where we're at right now. I'll report in when we get another piece on. Okay, we're finding some other confusion in this manual that they put, because what they do is they combine the standard table with the deluxe table, and it gets very confusing as to which is which. They have all of these diagrams in here, all these pictures showing you, which are very helpful.
Well, they're also confusing.
But they're also confusing, and also measurements on bolts and things don't necessarily line up with what you would expect for the tools. Really, I think one way they could improve this is have a separate book for the standard table and a separate book for the deluxe table, and whichever one that you have ordered, that's the book they send with you, because this is a case of too much information, and although they're very similar in assembling, it is still very confusing. So we've got the main rails on and the cross pieces that support it. Walter's tightening it up right now. Yeah, how long have we been working on this now? Well, it's been about an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's because we couldn't find our nuts.
Yeah, but now we found the nuts, so we've got that together. So far it's not difficult, but the way they laid out their instructions are like they're clear,
confusing.
But they're a little confusing. It's almost like they've given you too much information on each page.
Like it's not really like step 1 do this, step 2 do this.
No.
It's not really.
And it's like one of those storybooks, you know, where you finish the ending, you pick the ending, because it says, if you're not putting in the quilt path, or if you are doing this, then go to this page, or go to this page, or check this appendix out. So you're back and forth in the book. I still think it would have been better if they'd had a book for the deluxe table, a book for the standard table.
Well, yeah, what they do is it's a mishmash. You're looking at these drawings, and it's not clearly defined whether it's a standard table or it's deluxe table, so you get confused.
I mean, I think Just Get It Done Quilts with Karen Brown, she cut out a lot of stuff in her video because I don't think it went together quite as easy as she made it out to be. So we're being really real here. Now, are we just stupid? I don't think so. Well, I might be when it comes to assembling things, but Walter usually can figure anything out. I mean, after all, he puts together IKEA stuff.
Well, the first part was the way they identified where the fasteners were supposed to be located.
Yeah.
They said, well, your hardware comes, and they have a list of where a hardware is, and then we get a bag of hardware, and it's missing half the hardware. But
then we discovered it wasn't missing. It was there, but it wasn't where they said it was. Or in fact, they didn't really say.
No, they didn't say. What they did was they said you need these bolts. You need 2 kinds of bolts, and then later on it says to put the center posts in, you need the similar bolts to what was explained in the first page. So it almost looked like you need double bolts.
Yeah.
But
anyways, we are getting there. When I say we, Walter is getting there. Yes, it will be worth it when it's done, I hope. Okay, so this is how far we've gotten. We've got the rollers on. We have the Lucey head on. The handlebars on the front. Now we have to put on the automatic advance thing if we can get it out of the bloody packaging. They put it in styrofoam, and it's almost like the styrofoam has formed right around it, so that
it's like blown in insulation around it.
Like so that you can't even get it
out.
Oh, you finally got it out. Like, okay, there's such a thing as being well packed, and there's such a thing as packing so you can't get it out, but I guess we got it out. Okay, so now I have to put this little thing in. Okay, after 4.5 hours, we are still alive. We haven't killed each other, but it is together. Now, we haven't plugged it in yet to try anything because we still have much to learn before we can do that. And yeah, I don't know where these people are getting off on the idea this takes like 2.5 to 3 hours. It doesn't.
Maybe it does if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, maybe. The instructions are weird because they do take you through everything step by step. But the problem is, as I said before, they have got instructions if you have a bliss or you have a non-bliss track. They have instructions if you have a standard or a deluxe table. They have instructions if you have a quilt path, which is the computer program. But the thing is, they're all intertwined to each other. And it's very easy, even though they have pictures, photographs of what to do each step of the way, it's very easy to go from one to a different one that you don't have. It's confusing. Very confusing. It is logical how it goes together. But if you've never put one together before, you really got to set time aside and you've got to study everything step by step. I think it would have been better if they had a separate manual for each of the tables, a separate manual for the quilt path software, and for the bliss track. Because, okay, maybe they don't want to spend the money to print that many books, but it would make life a lot easier. But it's together. There it is. There's Juicy Lucy in all of her entirety. No, not Walter. I said Juicy Lucy. I didn't say Wanky Walter in there. So it's together. Tomorrow we'll play some more. Okay, so from that video, you can see we had our trials and tribulations putting it together, but it did go together, and I would say it wasn't really that complicated. It was just that everything was foreign to us at the time, and we were pretty much...
Plus, we were apprehensive about making a mistake where we would have to go backwards, so we wanted to make sure that everything was going together correctly.
Yeah, remember the camera's there looking to the camera.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, not at the screen up there right now. So anyways, it did go together. None of the parts were damaged. Everything was there. And then we left it. After we got it all together, it was about 6 o'clock at night on a Thursday night. And we were just drained from unpacking this and trying to decipher the instructions and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't bother to set it up to start playing with it because we just figured we'd start to make a lot of mistakes because we were tired. The next day we had things we had to do, and of course that was on the weekend of the retreat, the Idiot Quilter retreat. So we had the cocktail party on Friday night, so we didn't get to it on Friday. And Saturday was all day was the retreat, and we were tired after that, so we never got to it. So we didn't get to it until Sunday afternoon. And then we started to play with it. And I've already shown you in previous videos that came out this week, Walter doing some free motion quilting on it and trying it out. Well, we've done a little bit more than that since then. But what we want to talk about now, and I have some pictures to show you as we discuss this, we're going to take you on a little tour of the features that come with this machine. So let me switch screens. And there you are now. So what you're seeing right now, and it's difficult to get it in one shot, but this is the Lucey. And all set up. Now, you'll notice it has all these rollers on it to have canvas on it. If you've never used a long arm machine before, essentially what you're doing is you are attaching the layers of your quilt to these rollers. And then it pulls everything nice and tight, so there's no basting that needs to be done in terms of putting your layers together. Now, there is some basting. But you use the machine to do that, and you're just going along the top. You're just going along the top of the quilt itself to hold that layer down, because we're doing something called floating. And I'm not going to get into a discussion about how to put your quilt on the machine in this video. We might save that for another video later on. Right now, we just want to talk about the features. So you can see it's a big machine. It's long. It's 10 feet long. Not the longest one you can get. You can get a 12-foot. You can also get shorter ones, can't you? You can go as short as
you
what?
can get 8 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot, and 14 foot.
Oh, 14 foot.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's on the deluxe table.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the deluxe table in a moment, what that's all about. But we got the 10 because it fit in our space the best, and you can do up to a queen size on the 10. I have never made a quilt bigger than queen size, and lately most of the quilts I make are less than a queen size. If we ever did make a king for whatever reason, I can take it down to Whirls and Swirls, which is our APQS dealer, and I can rent time on one of her machines and do it there. So this is not a big concern. If we put a 12-foot in here, which would do a king, we would lose a foot on either end of this machine. And right now, it's just comfortable in the room. If we'd gone that route, we'd be squeezing in and out on the edges of the machine. And you do want to be able to walk around your machine from both ends. So this size works for us. So let's take another shot here. So here is the main event. This is the actual sewing apparatus. And now you might think that these work the same as a sewing machine. They do not. A sewing machine has something that a long arm does not have. Long arm doesn't have feed dogs. So basically the way you're feeding your quilt through this is through the system of rollers. The rollers are partially manual and partially electric, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. But here you can see this is where the needle is. There isn't a lever for lifting up your foot on here. You don't really need that. Underneath that needle where you see it now, there is a little platform of sorts. It's basically the hole where the needle goes down, picks up the bobbin thread, and does your sewing. And yes, this does have a bobbin. I don't have a picture of that because that's buried underneath this quilt that's sitting right here right now. This is just a practice sandwich. It's not really a quilt. It's just a piece of fabric on the top, piece of fabric for backing on the bottom, and your batting in between. It's just so we can practice some free motion, get used to the feel of this before we actually do a real quilt. But the bobbin is underneath, and the bobbin goes in very much like how the bobbin goes into what they call those side loaders.
Yeah, it's a side loading bobbin, sort of like what it used to be. Most sewing machines came with a side loading bobbin, but newer machines now come with a top loading bobbin. But this is more the old-fashioned style automatic machine bobbin.
Yeah. And it just snaps into the case. Now you have to drop a bobbin into the bobbin case, and the bobbins we buy are, well, we're using pre-wound ones right now, but we do have a winder for this as well. And we'll talk about that when we talk about things we have learned.
Yeah, the bobbin winder comes as a separate unit.
Yeah. So
you can just wind your bobbins off to the side if you want to do
yeah,
that.
it's a little box, and you put your bobbins on there and wind them. But we've already discovered that, well, we've only tried it with a wound bobbin, one that I have wound on the machine once, and it worked fine, but you don't get as much thread when you wind it yourself as you do on a pre-wound bobbin. So that means you're going to have to change bobbins more regularly. This machine does not have a sensor for letting you know when the bobbin is running out. Upper models, one of the upper models does have something like that. Now, I don't know about you, but what kind of sewing machines you might have, but I have sewing machines and embroidery machine that have that kind of system on them. And I'm very used to that, but I'll just have to get used to it on here. You just have to, you'll figure out how many rows of quilting you can do before you need to replace the bobbin with it. And so far on the quilts I've done, I didn't have to change. Well, the latest one I just did, well, the only one that I've done, it wasn't a huge quilt, so one bobbin worked fine with that. Other things on this, they're very simple machines, really.
They're a straight stitch machine.
Yeah, they're straight stitch machine. You see the handles at the front. There's buttons on those handles. Both buttons do the same thing. So it's just really whether you're left-handed or right-handed or which one you feel most comfortable pressing.
And it has two positions. One position where it just does a single stitch and drops the needle and brings it back up again. And another switch that starts the machine running.
Yeah. Now, when you first use this, I get mixed up on where to push the buttons. I'm getting better now. There is a white dot. You'll notice it at the top of that one button to the right of the screen. There's one on the left one too, but it's more visible on the right side. If you push that button towards, it's a toggle. If you push the switch towards the white button, it'll drop or raise your needle, depending on what position you stopped in. If you stopped in the down position, it'll come up. If you started in the up position, it'll go down. Now, why would you want to use that? Well, that's so you can pull up your bobbin thread for one thing, because just like quilting on a domestic machine, you usually pull your bobbin thread up to the top, so you don't have like a string hanging or thread hanging out from the bottom of your quilt. Works the same way with this. When you push the toggle towards the bottom position, nothing will happen if your needle is down. If your or even if it's up, it just sits there, but you hear the motor hum. As soon as you start to move those handlebars in whatever direction you're going in, and it goes in all directions, then the needle starts running.
That's only when the stitch regulator is on.
Yeah, only when the stitch regulator is on, which most of the time you'll want to use the stitch regulator when you're first starting. Now, I've heard of people who, over time, as they get used to the machine, will sometimes, when they're doing free motion, turn off the regulator.
Now, if you turn off the regulator, if the regulator is off and you turn on that switch, then the machine will just start stitching.
Yeah, so you have to move it. You are now the stitch regulator for it. So yeah, that takes a few minutes to get used to, pushing the button the right way. But very quickly you catch on to that. The next picture shows you it from another angle. Now, you'll notice some things in this picture. You'll notice up here, there is this motor. This motor is attached to this box, and there is a long wire, and I didn't get a picture of it, but there's a foot pedal below. The foot pedal does not work like a foot pedal on a sewing machine. All it does is takes this roller here, and it winds or unwinds your quilt. So as you get finished a row or two rows, you're getting closer to this bar and you still have more quilt to go, then you put your foot on the wind pedal. There's two pedals, a wind and unwind, and that brings your quilt up here. There is also a braking mechanism here. This is a manual roller. It is what the backing fabric is attached to. And you pull that little blue lever up, and then you can roll the quilt one way or the other. I get sometimes mixed up and I forget to take the brake off when I'm winding the quilt. That is not a good thing, okay? Because then your quilt starts to get really tight and it doesn't move too far, and it can take it off of these little red things here. And these are called red snappers. It's a plastic tubing system that fits over. We had to put these in. We had to sew a casing into this one and to this one. This bar we'll come to in a minute. And you clamp your backing fabric into those. But we had to do the sewing first. It wasn't that hard. It's not that even, as you can see here, but that doesn't matter. It's just for utility purposes, not aesthetic. And there is a doweling. Actually, it's a plastic doweling that goes down that full length. Then you have something to clamp the edge of your quilt onto at the top and at the bottom.
If you don't have that clamping system, then you would have to pin your quilt to the leaders of the quilt machine.
Which before we did we try? Yeah, we did do a pinning.
We did a pinning, a couple of pinnings actually.
Before we had the red snappers.
I mean, it's not terrible, but the red snappers do make it very easy for you to load the quilt on it.
And you don't want to run over a pin, especially at the bottom section. When you come to the bottom, you still have to pin because you will run out of anything holding the quilt. This is called free
This is called floating.
floating. That's it.
Full
Floating.
float. It's called a full float.
Yeah. And basically what's happening is the only pieces that are clamped is your backing fabric. You see this piece here? That's my backing fabric. That's the wrong side of the backing fabric. It's clamped here, and you can't see it here. It's under the roller, but it's clamped under here as well. Then the batting and the quilt top are floated on top. But what you do before you start to quilt is you will stitch a basting line right across the top of your quilt. Now, there's some stuff you need to do to make sure your quilt is straight and things like that. You'll also go down the sides. And you go down as far as you can go, quilt, and then you click on that foot pedal, and this winds your quilt up over this roller, and then you do some more basting down the side, and away you go. So that secures everything. Another thing that secures this are these clamps, and there are 4 of them. There's one here, there's one here, here, and here. And this is a stretchy webbing. And what you do is you clamp that onto your backing fabric and your batting, and you make your batting and your backing fabric about, it's recommended that you have at least 4 inches all the way around. Tracy at Whirls and Swirls told us best thing to do is to cut your batting and your backing about 10 inches larger than your quilt top. And that'll give you lots to clamp onto, and you can run off the edge of your fabric, especially when you're using a Panograph. You will go off the edge of the fabric a little bit, and that's okay, because all that'll get cut away later. But these keep everything taut on both sides. Again, you have to get used to the idea that, and this is me, not only do I forget to take the brake off, but I'm winding this along, and I forget about taking these off before I wind it, because these travel along with it and they can get caught under here. You only do that once. And by not taking that brake off, I'm winding it. I was on this side of the machine because I was doing a Panograph, which we'll talk about. And suddenly I heard a snap and I went, oh fuck, shit, oops, bad language on the video. I went, what the hell have I done? And what it was is I pulled the clamps off these. It didn't do any damage, but you had to get them back on and kind of line up.
I had to realign the quilt because we were doing a Panograph, so the Panograph had to match up.
So that was a bit tricky, but it is doable. And you want to know something? I'm kind of glad that that happened, because I saw how to realign the Panograph. So these are mistakes that I think most people probably make when they first get a long arm, but not to panic. You learn from that. So this is the motor that runs that, and this is the power bar.
And that motor is an optional feature on most of the machines.
Yeah, this was something
from the
that
base price type of thing. So
yeah,
in our case, we bought the machine, the Lucey, on sale. And part of the sale was they threw in the advancing motor.
Yeah, with it free. There's a little switch on here too, so if you don't want to use the foot pedals, you can use the little switch. It's just a toggle switch. Okay, moving around to the back. Now this is the table. And this table, there are 2 kinds of tables. There's the standard table and the deluxe. What's the difference?
Well, actually, the standard table, is not as sturdy. It's not as the metal that is on it is not as thick, and it's not as sturdy as the Advanced Plus,
As the deluxe.
As the Deluxe. And the feet are not leveling feet on the other one. I don't think you can level your, or you can't.
You have to put stuff
I think
under.
you can level your table, but you don't. You can't raise the level of the table, whereas this one you can raise the level of the table if you want to.
You can raise the table up from its original position up as much as 9 inches. Now you might say, well, why is that important? Well, it depends on your height. If you're a really tall person, you'll probably want to raise it up quite a bit. In our case, we're not that tall, and actually we had to do very little to raise it any for our comfort with it. But you do need to level your machine. So the leveling feet make leveling it a lot easier, because if your machine isn't level, this whole part here,
will start to slide on its own.
yeah, it'll just move on its own. And you really don't want it to move on its own because it'll start to sew if you've got the stitch regulator on in a certain position. So that's not a good thing. Now there is something called channel locks, and I don't know if I have a picture showing it because they're actually on the other
They're
side.
on the other side. Actually, all it is it's mounted next to one of the wheels on the bottom of the machine. And what it does is it keeps the machine from moving front, forward, and backward. It's just a dial that screw actually with a rubber piece on the end of it that pushes down on the table that they are on the the platform that the machine is mounted on, and keeps the machine in position so it won't roll backwards and forwards.
Yeah. Now if you get another model up, they have electronic channel locks, and they have ones that are for the horizontal and for the vertical. This one doesn't have that. It just handles the horizontal, the vertical. It locks the vertical. Yeah. With it. So that's the difference in the tables. Now there's also something called a non-bliss track and a bliss track. This is the track. And if you notice under here and under here, this is sitting on that track. So explain the difference between the two.
Well, actually, the bliss track is using a ball bearing to allow you to move the machine backwards and forward, or actually, it's from left to right, I guess if you want to say,
and right
horizontal. It's supposed to be a much smoother movement. The original track is just, I think, on wheels. And it's not supposed to be as smooth a movement. So this one gives it a very light touch when you're moving the machine. You can actually move all of this. I'm going to call it the head because I don't know what you call it, but it's where the needle I showed you before is located and everything. This is Lucey, basically. Yeah, and Lucey is about a 45-pound machine.
Yeah.
And,
so you can move it with with the bliss track, with the ball bearings, as Walter's already explained. You can actually move this with one finger if you want. That's how smooth it is. And again, when you have the bliss track, because it moves so easily, that's when I think having the deluxe table is a benefit because of the way you can level it. So things don't go away from you. Don't move, start rolling away. Now, it's not like they're rolling down a hill. It's just as a very slow creep, but you don't want that creep. You'll notice this is where your thread goes, and it's got a big stand. This is a average size spool of thread.
It's 1,000-meter spool.
1,000, but you can put larger spools on here, cones, 5,000 meters, and that kind of thing. In fact, this machine came with 5,000 meter. They had called it a starter kit of thread, and so we have had it there. Now, this little thing sticking out here is the laser light, and this piece of paper is called a Panograph, and you can see there's a design on here. It's a long roll of paper with a design, and what you do is you'll notice there's handlebars back here as well, and there's switches, so you can operate this machine from the front or from the back. You operate it from the back when you're doing a Panograph, and all you're doing is tracing with that laser light. It's shining on here. You line it up so it's on one of these lines, and you just trace around the lines. And as you're doing that, your needle's moving up here and putting the pattern that you're tracing here onto your quilt. So if you're not comfortable with free motion quilting, but you want something that looks like you may have free motion quilted it or an elaborate design, you can get a wide selection of these Panographs. You can buy them. And there's like all kinds of different designs that you can get for this, and they're reusable. You just roll them up. You notice there's a piece of plastic here. Well, that protects the scroll when you have it down here, and you notice there's some tape, and that's for a different video to explain how we do a Panograph, because this has to do with the repeat patterns.
Yeah, well, basically your taping is for figuring out where to start and stop on your quilt.
Yeah, it's the advancement of it. But that's another video in itself. We're not going to get into that right now. there was something here I was going to point out. Oh yeah, over here on this table, this is the little bobbin winder, okay, that comes with it. It's electric, and that's where it sits. That's its home. It came with the machine. I think that's all I want to talk about on this slide. This is a close-up of the laser light. I don't have it on right here, but here's something you can do with the laser light. If you remember in the first picture, you saw there was a pair of scissors and tweezers hanging from a big bar on top of the of Lucey. Well, a lot of people use that for that purpose, but we did not know this. But Walter discovered it, that you can what? Move the laser light?
You can move the laser light to the front and have a design, not necessarily a panograph that goes all the way down, but a design that is a small portion, maybe the size of a block of a quilt, that's a panograph or a drawing of some sort.
Or a stencil.
Or a stencil. And you can have that off to the side and then just quilt a block based on that stencil or line drawing. And you use the laser light, and again, just like the panograph, you just trace that little pattern out onto your block, but it's on the front of the machine.
Now there is a special little platform you can get that crosses over all the rollers, and to put your whatever that little design is on it, and it makes, I think, life easier. You don't have to have something like that, but I don't know if we'll invest in something like that or not. Well, wait, we haven't tried that feature.
Yeah, I don't know how often you would use that feature, but you might find that you want to use it a little bit more often.
Well, if you didn't want to do free motion quilting because you weren't confident in that yet, but you wanted to do a different design in smaller, say an 8-inch block or a 6-inch block on your quilt, then you could use something like that to give you a free motion look, but you're using a setup like a panograph.
I could see you doing it like, you know how you've got blocks that have patterns on it, right? Like you've got your...
Like the embroidery?
Like you've got blank space on your quilt, which is just a plain color, right? One color, and there's no pattern to it. That would be easier to free motion than you would maybe a piece that has a pattern on it, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then you could do the panograph or the laser light on the part that has the pattern instead of doing free motion on it, and then reserving the part where it's just plain fabric for free motion.
Yeah. Down the road, we will show you in more detail how panographs work, and possibly once we've tried it out, how this other method of putting laser light on the front would work as well. That's for future videos. Okay, so in this picture, so here's the bar that I'm talking about that we would put the laser light on if you were doing it from the front. But you can see what I've got on here, a pair of tweezers and a pair of scissors. They're there, they're handy.
And your laser input is on that side.
And laser input's on this side. Now, here are some things on here. There's the laser input. It just plugs in. There's one down here that's plugged into. It's like plugging in a set of headphones in a sense. So here you have your, here you have your stitch regulator on or off. It's just a toggle. Sometimes you don't want, you want to do your own thing. You don't want stitch regulator on. Right now I'm at the stage where, no, I think I need the stitch regulator. Now here, thread break sensor. We don't have a thread break sensor. That's, I guess you can.
No, you can't get it on this machine. What it is, it's for... They use this, this box or whatever that Lucey is in for the upper models as well.
Oh, okay.
So they just, that's just a holding spot
for it. This is also has your, I guess I don't have a picture of it, but it's back here further is where the main power switch is to turns it on. Here is your stitch lengths. So you just turn the knob to whatever you want.
It also stitches faster.
Faster if you
have a what do you call it, a higher stitches per inch. So that shows you a turtle, meaning it'll go slow.
And there's the button for it faster. This thing, what did we determine this was for?
I think it's what they call your flywheel, and I think that's the thing that makes your needle go up and down.
Oh, so you can do it manually if you needed to do some kind of adjustment. So,
unfortunately, the manual doesn't really talk about what that is.
So we're going to have to ask our dealer about that one when we take our all-day course, which we just arranged today with her. This switch here turns on all the lights. There are lights up in here. There are lights down in here, LEDs, and they are pretty bright. We've got 3 fluorescent tube lights in the ceiling in this room, so we have a lot of light already, but this helps. This really does help, and they're nice and bright as well. Okay, so I've already shown you this is from the other side, the clamps and things like that, but you'll notice that there's a lot of space underneath here as well. Oh, you might be wondering what the blue tape is on here. This roller, there's about 3 different ways you can mount a quilt, lay out a quilt on your long arm. We're doing what's called the floating method, which
what they call a full float. You can do something called a partial float.
Which I don't really understand what that is.
Well, partial float, the bar that has the blue tape on it is called the quilt top roller.
Yeah.
Right. And some people, if they do a partial float, or you need to attach your top to the quilt roller with the quilt top roller. We haven't yet done that. I don't know if we will do that. No. Our dealer recommends doing the free float, so that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
So
it's also, I think, one of the fastest ways to get your quilt onto the machine as well, by doing that. But so this is just painter's tape. It just holds the canvas leader, that's what they call these, secure, and out of our way, because we're not really using it at the moment. But it's there for, if for some reason we have some kind of thing where we feel that we need to use that. And this gives you a better view of what we call the red snappers here.
Actually, and the roller next to the red snappers doesn't have any canvas on it, and that's what they call a leveling bar, and it is part of you need to have your quilt on going under that so that it's level. It helps level it with the rollers.
Yeah. So basically this whole thing is set up so that you will not have any tucks. If you put it on right, with all these things like these straps here, the red snappers, the whole bit, the winding system, the bars, you will have a nice flat quilt on top and on the bottom. No tucks, which is, is a quilter's
dream.
Yeah, to have that kind of thing. I was going to say it's a bit of a nightmare to have the tucks. And everybody's had a tuck in their quilt before. So you know what that's all about. So that's what the whole machine looks like. Let's just go back to this one again. Yes, it's a big machine. It's a big investment. And there's plenty of space underneath here for storage. If we want to get fancy, we could probably get Alex units from IKEA that would fit under here. But these are stuff that I had left over from my craft room that when I redid it into the sewing room that were left over. And right now, they're working fine. We have lots of storage space in this room that you can't see right now off to the side as well, which are basically these types of plastic bins. So they have our threads right now and whatever, but room for expansion. We did put this carpet on the floor. This carpet was in this room to start with, but we bought a sort of a cushioned runner here as well, because this is a concrete floor. And when you're standing here, it can get cold in the wintertime, and you want comfort when you're doing this, because you're going to be standing in front of this machine for several hours if you do it all in one fell swoop. So anyways, that's the features of the machine. Let me switch over to us. Yeah, we're back. So what's our first quilting experience been like? Good. At first, it's a little bit, how would you say it? It's not hard, but it can be.
It's a little intimidating.
Yeah, when you're putting the quilt on it, because there's this you have to do and that you have to do. However, I am sure after about the 3rd or 4th quilt you throw on there, you become a pro. And it starts to make sense to you. you have to get your mind around that this is not like a domestic sewing machine.
Yeah, because you're moving the head. You're not moving the fabric around.
Yeah. And so things work a little differently, but it doesn't take long. I mean, we've had it for a week, and actually we haven't even used it for a full week. We've used it for 5 days.
And somebody remarked to you before when we got it that we need to dampen it because it's going to be really noisy. And personally, I think your embroidery machine.
Yeah, the embroidery machine is noisier than this machine is. Yes, it makes more noise than your sewing machine, but not a lot. So really, I don't see that as a negative at all. What else about that we have learned from this? Well, we learned how to mount a quilt properly, and I already talked about some of the pitfalls in that. I've also learned that, yes, you make sure that you have a generous amount of backing fabric and batting that's much bigger than your quilt top because you need things to grab onto.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you're a type of person that wants to save on batting and backing, this is not really the way to go.
No, you shouldn't cheap out on that. Now, we are going to be experimenting with different types of threads. Like I said, right now we're using Glide, but you don't have to use Glide. I think you can use whatever you want to use. You'll get your own personal preferences for that. Can't think of anything else I've learned this week.
Well, you've learned that you gotta take the clamps off.
Yeah, I did learn. That's the big
and
lesson.
The break off when you move the quilt forward.
Yeah.
So
there are a lot of things you have to remember when you're first doing this. Okay, but it'll become second nature after you've done enough quilts on it. So it just takes a little bit of time. But I have now quilted my first quilt. I'll be showing that next week on the Idiot Quilter.
And we need to practice free motion.
Yeah, we need to practice free motion. I lean towards the panographs because, free motion is still free motion. But, but we'll practice. And we'll get better at it. Who knows? Maybe we'll be doing feathers in no time, elegantly. I don't know about that. Walter might be. I'm not sure about me. But anyways, yeah, I'm really glad we bought this machine. So our first quilting experience with it has been a good one, or for my first quilt that I've actually done on it. And that was a good experience. It worked out fine. It looks great. So, what else? Well, be prepared to spend more money after you get your machine because you got to buy thread, right? But that goes with anything. Is thread expensive? No, it's about the same price as any kind of thread. Well, actually, 1,000 meters of Glide is less than what it costs for Aurifil. It's 1,000 meters on the Aurifil, isn't it?
No, it's 1,300.
Oh, is it 1,300? Well, they're $14, $15.
They're expensive, yeah.
$6.99 for this.
Glide is $6.99 Canadian.
Where we get it
for
1,000 meters.
So it's actually about the same price as for any embroidery thread.
And we buy the pre-wound bobbins, as I said, and you can wind your own, but pre-wound, I think they were.
I think the 15? Pre-wound bobbins hold more thread on it.
And there's how many in a package? 10 or 12?
I think she has 15 in it.
Is there 15 in a package? Well, it's $15 for package. So basically, it's $1 a bobbin, where we get it. Okay, and we're talking Canadian dollars, as we already said. Yeah, we had to buy some carpeting. Well, the little runner piece, that's optional. You don't have to, but we did. You'll want a pair of tweezers. You'll want some snips, and you'll want to keep them with your machine, because if you have to run around looking for this equipment all the time, then that's annoying. You want to set everything up, and we're still working on this, where everything is at your fingertips that you need most often. Okay, So can you think of anything else at your first impression of this?
Well, actually, so far it's been positive. Just that I want to get more into free motion stuff, but
Yeah. Uh, you know, but we haven't had it a full week
no,
yet.
I know.
So that'll come. Okay. So in the future, we will be doing more videos about our use and our experiences with Lucey. We'll talk about panographs in one video. We'll try that out. We'll show you some free motion on it to the best of our ability, and maybe show you how we do a free float with the quilt layering and everything like that. But that's for a future time. So before we end up here and changing thought, just a reminder that come this Wednesday, October the 5th, that is Wednesday, isn't it? What's today? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Wednesday, October the 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's another craft and chat session. Have it once a month. The link for it is in the show notes below. All are welcome. And you can come and go as you please to that. We just work on our sewing stuff.
Did you have to say that was So Chatty episode 28? You said that you were going to do that.
No, I meant this that I did. Never mind.
Okay.
Stay with the program. And also in the show note links, there is a video that I just put up today, a link to it, of the whole process of changing this room in here to my sewing studio and getting rid of all my crafting stuff, 20 years worth of it. So I've put that together as all one video as well. So there's a link for that. And there's a link also to the Idiot Quilter Presents, which was Nora Burrows today, which was a great interview. So if you haven't seen that, you may want to check that out. And yeah, everything else is self-explanatory. So that's it from us today on So Chatty. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye for now.
Bye.